Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. We always try to get past those surface level headlines about autism, and today we're really doing that.
Mm,
We're going to be talking about how autism intersects with like pretty privilege
yeah.
and what it means to be invisible within the autistic community.
Yeah, and it's sort of like there's this almost like a preconceived notion of what autism looks like.
Right.
And that can be really, really damaging.
Totally, and that's what we're digging into today.
Yeah.
We are taking a look at this blog post from Cheap ABA called "The Uncomfortable Truth: Autism, Pretty Privilege, and the Myth."
Okay.
And it's raising some really important points that we often don't hear about.
Absolutely. And it really makes us ask, who are we leaving out when we talk about autism, and what are the consequences of that?
Yeah, that's a great point. So let's start with this whole concept of invisibility. Can,
Yeah.
can you kind of break that down for us? Like, what does that mean when we're talking about autism?
Sure. So you can kind of imagine a world where your experiences aren't really reflected, where you feel like your challenges aren't acknowledged. And that's kind of the reality for a lot of people in the autistic community.
Mm.
And specifically, we're talking about people who are non-binary, genderqueer people of color and people with physical disabilities. And they are often just left out of the media portrayals and advocacy and even research studies.
It's like the story of autism is being told without them,
Exactly.
which just seems so unfair and incomplete.
Yeah, and it leads to so many problems like misdiagnosis, a lack of support systems, just profound isolation, all because they're not represented.
And if you're autistic and you don't see yourself reflected in that narrative,
Right.
you might even start to question your own experiences. Like, am I really autistic?
Absolutely. And that's where this idea of pretty privilege comes in.
Okay.
So our source defines it as this expectation that autistic individuals must conform to traditional beauty standards to be accepted.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
So it's not enough to just try to navigate the world with a neurodevelopmental difference, but then you're also being judged against these arbitrary standards of beauty.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a double burden.
Absolutely. And what makes this even more complicated is that those who are seen as conventionally attractive actually might receive more accommodations or understanding simply because they align with these societal preferences.
So it's almost like those societal biases we have about disability and attractiveness are kind of colliding
Exactly.
and creating this uneven playing field. Are we essentially creating a hierarchy than within the autistic community itself?
Yeah, I think that's a really valid question. And sadly, the answer is often yes.
Yeah.
We risk prioritizing the voices and experiences of those who fit a certain mold,
Right.
and leaving others feeling even more marginalized.
And the blog post shares this really powerful anecdote about someone who talks about this constant pressure to mask their autistic traits
Yeah.
while also trying to meet these beauty standards.
Mm.
And it just sounds exhausting.
It really is like battling on two fronts, right? You're
Yeah.
trying to appear normal while conforming to these often unattainable ideals of beauty.
Yeah.
And that takes such a toll mentally and emotionally.
Absolutely. And that's just one story, right? Like there are countless others out there, all reflecting these unique pressures that people face.
It's like this constant feeling of having to choose between being your authentic self and being accepted. And that's a choice that no one should have to make.
And it's kind of disturbing to think that those pressures like don't just stop at the surface, right? Like
Right.
they can seep into the autistic community itself.
Absolutely. And that's a really important point to consider. We're talking about internalized ableism and misogyny.
Okay, so let's break those down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
What does internalized ableism mean when we're talking about autism?
Well, you know how society often sends these like negative messages about disability, right? Like it's a flaw or a limitation or something to be ashamed of.
Right.
Internalized ableism is when autistic individuals actually start believing those messages about themselves.
So it's like they're taking those stereotypes and turning them inward.
Exactly. And it shows up in different ways.
Yeah.
Maybe an autistic person feels ashamed of their stimming behaviors,
Mm.
or they try to hide their autistic traits because they've internalized this idea that those traits make them less worthy or less capable.
Which is so sad because those behaviors are often a natural way for autistic people to regulate their sensory input and cope with stress.
Absolutely. It's almost like a form of self-rejection.
Right.
And it perpetuates those negative stereotypes within the community.
And then there's internalized misogyny, which seems especially relevant for autistic women and girls.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is when women and girls absorb these sexist beliefs about their gender, and it leads them to undervalue their worth and capabilities.
So on top of navigating the world as an autistic person,
Right.
they're also dealing with these societal expectations of what it means to be a woman, like this pressure to be quiet and agreeable and feminine, all while trying to mask their autistic traits.
Yeah, exactly. And imagine the emotional toll of that, constantly feeling like you're not measuring up, not fitting in.
Hmm.
It can make it so difficult to assert your needs, to feel confident in who you are.
It really highlights how interconnected all of these issues are,
Hmm.
like ableism, misogyny, the societal expectations. It all plays a part.
Exactly. We can't address these issues in isolation. They're
No.
all rooted in these broader societal structures like patriarchy and ableism.
Hmm.
And dismantling those structures requires a really multifaceted approach.
Where do we even begin? It seems like such a huge task.
It is a huge task, there's no doubt about that. But even small steps can make a difference, and it starts with awareness.
Okay.
Educating ourselves and others about these complex issues.
Oh, like having open dialogues, challenging stereotypes when we encounter them,
Hmm.
and just promoting a more inclusive understanding of autism?
Hmm. Exactly. And supporting organizations that are actively working to dismantle these systems of oppression.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that everyone's experience with autism is unique and valid,
Hmm.
regardless of their gender, their appearance, or any other factor. And that kind of brings us back to the blog post.
Right.
It doesn't go into great detail about these internal forms of oppression,
Right.
but it's clear that they're linked to invisibility and
Yeah.
pretty privilege.
Absolutely. It's like a ripple effect. Those societal attitudes create these external pressures, which then get internalized.
No.
And it creates this cycle of negativity and self-doubt.
Mhm.
So what can our listener take away from all of this?
Mm.
Like, what are some concrete actions they can apply to their own lives?
It feels like self-reflection is key.
Yeah.
Recognizing our own biases, because we all have them,
Hmm.
and actively working to dismantle those biases.
That's an excellent starting point. Ask yourself, am I making assumptions about someone's autism based on their appearance, their gender, or how well they fit that stereotypical image?
And it's also about seeking out diverse perspectives within the autistic community.
Absolutely.
Reading books, listening to podcasts, following autistic creators on social media. All of those things can help broaden our understanding.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to speak up when you encounter internalized ableism or misogyny, whether it's online or in person.
Right, like challenge those harmful beliefs, educate others, advocate for a more inclusive and compassionate perspective.
Every voice matters.
Exactly. Individual actions contribute to collective change. The author of the blog post also talks about the importance of supporting autism-led organizations.
Absolutely.
They're often at the forefront of this fight for equality and inclusivity.
They're the ones doing the groundwork, creating real change. So doing your research, donating if you can, and spreading the word about their work can make a tangible difference.
It's about putting your actions behind your intentions. As we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave our listener with this thought. How can we move beyond simply accepting autistic individuals and towards genuinely celebrating and valuing their unique strengths and perspectives?
That's a really powerful question.
Yeah.
Like moving beyond just tolerance
Yeah.
and into a space where neurodiversity is truly valued.
Absolutely. And imagine a world where we not only acknowledge, but we actually embrace those unique ways that autistic individuals experience and interact with the world.
Right.
Those differences that are often seen as deficits can actually be incredible strengths.
It's like we're so focused on what's perceived as lacking that we completely miss out on the potential that neurodiversity
Look,
brings.
think about the strengths that we often overlook, like that exceptional attention to detail, those strong analytical skills, the deep passion for specific interests, and the ability to think outside the box.
Yeah.
These are assets in so many fields.
It's like a different operating system. Not better or worse, just different.
Exact.
And those differences can spark innovation and creativity and new ways of problem solving.
Absolutely. And look at the contributions that artistic individuals have already made in fields like science, technology, art, activism.
Right.
We need a world where those contributions are not just recognized, but they're encouraged.
It's about creating an environment where autistic individuals can thrive, not just survive.
Exactly.
Instead of trying to fix autism, we should be celebrating it
Mm-hmm.
and providing the support needed for individuals to reach the full potential.
Absolutely. And that means building a society that's truly inclusive and accessible.
Right.
One that recognizes neurodiversity as a strength.
So where does that leave our listener?
Mm-hmm.
What can they do to contribute to this shift in perspective?
Well, it all starts with education. Seek out information about autism from autistic voices themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Read books, listen to podcasts, follow autistic creators on social media. Yeah, let's hear it from the source.
Exactly. And while you're educating yourself, pay attention to the language that you use.
Right.
Ditch those terms that are demeaning or perpetuate stereotypes.
Words have power.
Exactly. And if you encounter those stereotypes, whether it's in conversation or the media or online, don't let it slide.
Right.
Challenge them.
And on a larger scale, advocate for policies and practices that promote inclusion and accessibility
Absolutely.
in schools, workplaces, our communities.
Support organizations that are led by autistic individuals, amplify their voices, help create platforms where they can share their perspectives.
It's about recognizing that creating a more equitable and just world for autistic individuals is a collective effort. We all have a role to play.
And remember, this isn't just about helping autistic people.
Yeah.
It's about understanding that a society that embraces and values neurodiversity benefits everyone.
Absolutely.
It enriches our perspectives, broadens our understanding, and unlocks new possibilities.
It's about creating a world where everyone can thrive, regardless of their neurotype.
Exactly.
A world that embraces and celebrates the beautiful tapestry of human experience.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. Challenge your assumptions about autism. Question those narratives you've been told. Seek out diverse perspectives within the autistic community. There's so much to learn and so much to gain.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the complex world of autism privilege and visibility. We hope you've gained some new insights and are inspired to continue learning and advocating for a more inclusive and just world.
Remember, change starts with each one of us.
Until next time, keep diving deep.